In this section, we're going to be discussing the most common type of water that most people in the US have access to, which is tap water. So let's dive in. We know that water is H2O, right? But when we start adding a bunch of other things to it, it's no longer just H2O. It could be H2O, PNA, CH, etc. It becomes this chemical cocktail pouring out of the tap. And then it's not tap water at that point, it's tap liquid. So let's first discuss what we might find pouring out of the typical tap, because most Americans drink tap liquid on the daily. The largest additive is chlorine. Now, chlorine is a biocide, meaning it acts as an antibiotic, so it kills things off. And it's good to have that in pipes that transport the water because we don't want bacteria to build up, but unfortunately it does the same thing in our bodies. So you can sort of think of your body as like an inside-out tree, whose roots we've adapted to carry with us in our stomach as the microvilli that grow into the soil of our intestines. And they're alive. And we've got all kinds of microbiota, or tiny organisms, and microflora, or tiny plants, coming together to create this entire ecosystem that is our bodies. Microbes inhabiting your body are more numerous than stars in the known universe. And bacteria outnumber human cells. In fact, microbes outnumber your own cells within your body 1.3 to 1. So you have more other living organisms within you than you have your own cells. And beyond that, viruses outnumber bacteria, and microbial genes outnumber human genes. There are more than 5,000 species of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and viruses, and a new species is discovered with every 6 people that's tested. So when you subject your body to water with chlorine, you're actually creating a little mini genocide every time and really harming that ecosystem. But in addition to just drinking it through the digestive tract, whenever we shower or bathe, we're also absorbing it through our skin too. We absorb from 0.5 to 1.5 liters when we soak in the tub. And when we shower and volatilize that water into steam, we're breathing it through our lungs. Now get this. Chlorine creates trihalomethanes, which means that when it volatilizes, it becomes chloroform gas. So we're breathing in these trace amounts of chloroform. So if your tub is fed through the municipal water supply, I definitely recommend getting a really good high-quality shower filter or whole home filter, or at least a structurer. In particular, check out the carbon block filters on the Natural Action website under the filtration tab. And if you live in a city like Santa Fe, where I used to live, they might not put chlorine in the water, but they might add what's called chloramine, which is related to chlorine, but it's actually harder to get out, and it has a tendency to break down the plastics and rubbers that hold the piping together. So pipes are a whole other thing to consider. Much of the plumbing infrastructure in this country was actually installed during the Lincoln administration, and it hasn't been renovated except for minor repairs since then. So we need a massive revamp of the system, because the pipes and pumps are old school. And pumps too, that's another thing to consider. They're mechanical, and so they have all of these greases and lubricants on them that are leaching into the water. So you've got steel and copper and lubricants, and all these things are coming into the water supply with heavy metals and changing the pH of the water. And then the water filtration plant oftentimes has to put chemical pH balancers in there just to get the tap liquid back to neutral, which is fine until you put it in your body. You don't want that kind of stuff in your system. No bueno. And that's not even to mention the fluoride. Now, I'm not going to go deep into fluoride because it's a rabbit hole that deserves a whole course of its own. And by now, I hope that most of you already know the dangers of fluoride. But for now, let's just revisit the fact that fluoride is a neurotoxin, which means it's a poison that acts on the nervous system. Now, there are studies showing that children who drink fluoridated water grow up to have lower IQs. And it is true, as we've been told, that it accumulates in the osseous tissue or the bone tissue, like the teeth. But what we're not told is that because it's actually harder than calcium, it can make your teeth overly hard and brittle. In fact, too much fluoride in the teeth is actually a disease called fluorosis, where the teeth become chipped and cracked really easily. But after the osseous tissue, the second biggest place that it accumulates is in the soft tissues and glands. And the number one spot that it accumulates is in the pineal gland. Of course, that's the third eye, cross-culturally recognized as the center of spiritual awareness in the body. And it encrusts that gland, and remember, it's harder than calcium. Now, this gradually and subtly disables a person's individual, soul-directed willpower, and in fact, it was used for this express purpose in prison camps throughout Germany and Russia, to pacify the population. Now, brain scans of people who have consumed fluoridated water for their entire lives show a small hard knot in the area of their pineal gland. And in less esoteric terms, having a calcified pineal gland, because it's the master gland of the endocrine system, can lower the production of melatonin, throw off our circadian rhythms, mess with our reproductive function, and more. Fluoride can even calcify the cartilage in your joints, causing arthritis. And the FDA has classified it as a drug. So even according to the government itself, they are drugging the populace. But those are not the only drugs in the tap water supply. Research labs have found that in major cities, there are about 50 pharmaceuticals on average flowing through your typical tap. How did they get there? Well, in most cities, they have a closed-loop system, or what hydrologists affectionately call toilet-to-tap. This means that water comes into your tap to homes and businesses where you use it, and it gets swept away back to the filtration plant where it gets cleaned up, and then it's sent right back into homes again. That's right. If you live in a big city and you drink tap liquid, you're drinking toilet water. So if there are pharmaceuticals in the tap liquid, it's because people are peeing them out and they're not getting properly filtered out at the filtration plant, and then they're sent back into people's tap liquid supply. Now consider this. All of these pharmaceuticals have been more or less human tested in clinical trials at regular clinical doses, one by one, but over 50 of them mixed together at subclinical doses. No one knows the effects of this. No one knows if it's safe. No one knows how this is affecting people's psychology and their physiology on subtle levels in cities. The entire model of the plumbing infrastructure that is in use today is archaic, if not draconic. Flint, Michigan is just the tip of the iceberg. In Navajo country, they haven't had drinking water in 70 years. Since the 50s, their water has been poisoned by uranium mining and massive toxic spills. 40% of Navajo still don't have plumbing. Those families haul their water every day, and they pay 70 times more for the water they haul than piped water. And some Diné live on 10 gallons of water a day. Most Americans use 100 to 200 gallons a day. In fact, Flint isn't even among the most dangerous lead hotspots in America. All in all, Reuters found about 3,000 areas with recently recorded lead poisoning rates, at least double those in Flint, even during the peak of their contamination crisis. And more than 1,000 of them had blood tests at least 4 times higher than Flint. As the old school pipes continue to degrade, we will continue to see more people in poor areas suffering from waterborne illness. Now, there are ways to structure plumbing using certain pipes that actually work in harmony with the nature of water as a living organism, which not only eliminate the need for water to be treated at all, but it also generates energy passively just by the spiral flow of water. In other words, if we were to replace a city's pipes with those that have spiral striations on the inside of them, the plumbing alone could power a city's entire electrical grid. Because water flowing through a spiral experiences less resistance as the velocity is increased. And this is a mathematical constant, so the force of water in a vortex actually generates power, it creates electricity. This one insight could shift the entire paradigm of the planet forever, making nuclear and coal entirely obsolete. This is revolutionary, guys, not to mention the water will arrive at its destination revitalized, purified, and structured. Now, this isn't just a pipe dream, pardon the pun, it's really what's possible when we ally with water. But the plumbing we have in place now is exactly the opposite. Water arrives dead, chaotic, and filled with poisons. And I think it's time to sidestep that completely. And that's the good news. The good news is that we are sovereign beings with lots of choices and options, especially if we're fortunate enough to live at the height of privilege, if you're from the US. Choices are not that abundant for many people in the world, but I'm guessing for most of the people here watching this today, they are. Now, unfortunately, one of those options does not include the easy convenience of just getting a Brita filter or a pure filter or one of those simple carbon block filters. Those do basically nothing. If you look at the back of one of those boxes, it says that it removes the smell of chlorine. It doesn't remove the actual chlorine or fluoride, so it's basically useless. We call it the Febreze of water filters. If tap liquid is your only option, you must get a really high quality filter. And if you're stubborn about sticking with the whole tap liquid paradigm, remember this. Either you get a filter or you become a filter. In particular, check out the carbon block filters on the Natural Action website under the filtration tab. Now, if you have a filter, you still want to do all of the water alchemy strategies and steps that we're going to be discussing later in the course. Because water doesn't just need to be clean, it also needs to be activated. Filtration is just the first step. So I'll see you in the next video where we will dive into bottled water. And until then, have a beautiful day and stay hydrated.